So we're chatting today to Liz Hills, who lives at Wild Mountain Environmental Education Centre, and that's an hour and a half southwest of Brisbane on the border ranges on the Queensland side. So Liz, you're in perfect isolation there, but how are you sort of feeling and coping at this time, you know, where we're in lockdown?
You're right, we are in perfect isolation on top of a mountain in the middle of nowhere. It's been quite surreal, actually. It's only, we're kicked off March, we're now mid-May, so it's only now that I'm starting to feel, I don't have any volunteers, I don't have, that engagement that we usually have with our programs and people from the wider community. But back in those the first month really, it was life as normal. We've got large food stocks up here because we have lots of people coming through, and we live, very minimally on the land, and it didn't really feel a whole heap different. Then school holidays ended, and my beautiful husband and son started homeschooling, and that for home term, and that's been, I think, something that our family has really grown through.
So can you tell us a bit about Wild Mountains, the work that you do there, and about yourself, Liz?
Yeah, Wild Mountains. I came to know Wild Mountains very soon after I had a major accident. In 2004, I fell off a train in Thailand and I sustained a skull fracture. So I carry with me an acquired brain injury, which is often labelled as a hidden disability. And from there, I came to Wild Mountains in 2005, and I just fell in love with the land. And I came up here as a volunteer. Wild Mountains has a huge volunteer program. The vision of Wild Mountains is that we can all live together with the systems and lead fulfilling lives and not damage the systems of life on the planet, which really resonates with me. I think that there must be a way that we can be creative, be productive, be scientific, and still respect the world that we live on. Then after that, my husband and I went traveling for a bit. And then when we came back to Wild Mountains, we started to build a straw bale house over at a little property down the road that's part of Wild Mountains called Whiptail. And it also is something that at Wild Mountains is really passionate around doing best practice for sustainable living. So we use recycled materials, we solar orientated the house, and at Wild Mountains, we're all completely off grid. So the centre itself tries to walk the talk that we teach in our programs. So we collect our own rainwater, process our own waste, have I think 5 types of composting toilets up here and 3 different solar systems.
That sounds fantastic. Yes. So how have you sort of adapted the business side during the lockdown, or have you just gone into a holding pattern?
We've tried to get really creative. Wild Mountains has a huge plethora of volunteers and a huge community online, and we've really reached out to them to say, what do we do now? And they've come back with some really great ideas. So Wild Mountains is just next to the Border Ranges National Park, which is a gobsmackingly beautiful part of the world, which the Border Ranges is part of the Gondwana forest that links up, Congo, South America, really different, unique place. So we at Wild Mountains also try and create a buffer between that national park and the below farmlands, and do a lot of regeneration and a lot of land care. And our volunteers came back going, well, what do? We want to get out into the forest and out into that dirt. So we thought that we would start sending seeds, so that our volunteers could raise seeds at home during this time, and then later, when all those restrictions are lifted, they can come back and plant them and continue that vital work. We've also turned sorry, Jane?
Oh no, that's just so clever. That's all I was saying.
I think I've got a lot of hope for it. I think that it could be really exciting, a lovely way for people to remain connected and grow a forest. Those would be two really great outcomes, I think. We also took our sewing group that was inspired by a lot of the work that you did with your slow clothing. Our So Sustainable group often met at volunteer weekends at Wild Mountains, and now we're trying to do that online. And we held our first one last week, and we had a crew of us got together and shared the different projects that we were doing. We had a couple of homeschool kids on the call as well, which is really nice, just to help, once again, to really help build that connection. We talk a lot about connection to nature as chances for reflection, and connection to each other as chances to reflection and transformation.
Sorry, my phone rang, Liz. Yeah, so what skills and life experience are you drawing on to make all this happen, or are you learning as you go?
I think, to be honest, as most people that go through large traumatic events in their life, all the skills that I've learned how to cope with the new body I ended up with back in my early 20s, going from a vibrant young woman who was rock climbing, scuba diving, had a business and studying at university, to ending up in a hospital ward and not being able to dress myself. I think that has really given me a lot of ability to develop resilience, to understand that this too will pass, to be able to face that moment, I think. And I've also really, since that, then I've really engaged with connecting with nature, not as some ethereal big idea, but just that practical, everyday sense of being curious around the leaf that's in front of me, being at peace in myself, and being at peace just having a bit of a sit in a quiet spot in nature. And I think that those two practices have really just set me in good stead for difficult times like now, and that times that will be difficult again in the future. I think that when we learn that life is constantly changing, and that nature is also a constant change, and it's always a constant place where I can draw inspiration from, I think is really valuable.
Do you think that's one of the most important lessons? Is that sort of being in nature, the gardening, the daily processes, and being hands-on as part of that? Has that been really valuable for you?
Yeah, I think I've received lots of feedback from the hundreds of volunteers we've had over the last couple of decades, that it is really valuable. It is really valuable to come back to nature, to take those times for reflection, and to come back to those everyday doing practices. I see we have a lot of university students, and a lot of uni students get stuck behind a screen, and we at the center, we're in a little black hole, we're in a little black bubble where there is no extra screens or technology, and we invite them just to step back from that, just for a moment. And for some, it's really challenging. It's really, it causes some anxiety, and we feel here at Wild Mountains that means it's even more important to put it down and step away, and to talk to some people. Learning how to be comfortable in our own skin, I think, is part of the path to becoming an adult. And we just see time and time again that you can really achieve some of those special qualities and values through connection with nature. And that's outside of wild. Sorry?
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
That's okay. That's outside of the education practices we do. This is this idea of connecting to nature and being still and silent in nature, and that having massive benefits for us, is outside of the education that we provide to our primary school, our secondary school, and our university crews.
Mm. And is it the working with your hands? Like, is that part of it, that DIY, you know, the sewing and all of that? Is that
Well,
soothing as
Wild
well?
Mountains draws on a Earth Education pedagogy from the Institute of Earth Education. That's a global organisation based in America, and they have a really clear pedagogy of head, heart, and hands, and that you can't do one for a cohesive program, for a cohesive life. You can't do one without the other. And yet at Wild Mountains, we really follow that idea that if we give you some really different ideas or new ways of thinking, you know, a lot of systems thinking, or if we introduce some challenges to you, that we're then going to show you how to look at that problem with your hands and how to come into being and doing, you know, with we have a 2-week university program, and for the first week, we go out and we do land care and bush care every day. And that really sets your body up. So then you're able to be receptive and open to the more heady stuff that we do a bit later. And that can be really challenging for some people, but it does lay that groundwork. When we get out and we process with our hands what we need to be doing, it's a lot easier to integrate it into our being, I reckon. So head, heart and hands is the philosophy that we follow.
When are those programs going to be able to resume, Liz, you know, at Wild Mountains?
For this year, all of our programs, all of our university programs have been suspended. We have one primary school program, our Earth Keepers program, happening later in the year. I think it'll be a slow way back to delivering programs, but I think that it is still going to be our passion to try and inspire our community to reconnect with nature, just for the multitude of benefits that it has, which is sort of why we're grappling with online areas. And it is a lot, you're right, it is a lot of do-it-yourself stuff. So how do we send seeds? How do we send patterns for cutting up T-shirts that you would otherwise throw away, but you could turn into different things? How do we start engaging people with conversations around the way that they'd like the future to be?
And so has the crisis elevated your awareness of waste and where your resources come from? Or obviously you were quite switched on in that space already.
I think it's been able to open up conversation in that space. So we've been able to start having conversations with our supporters around things like food waste, and how is it that in this time we learn the skills to be able to repair things? How is it during this time that we view art resources differently, that you don't have to wander down to your local place to buy little knick-knacky plasticky things that you can stick to a poster for kids? You know, just really trying to rethink our the way that we consume. At Wild Mountains, you're right, it hasn't really had an effect on the way that we think about waste, but it has really had a great opportunity to start some really interesting conversations.
And so what's your best piece of advice for, you know, dealing with what's ahead?
I think I'd come back to being able to reflect that this too will pass, this too will change, that is the inevitability of life, and get back out into your garden. You know, even if that's a little pot plant inside, a little balcony on your porch, or into your garden. Not so that you can be productive or do anything, but just so that you can get curious about all the life that's around you. I think that's something that's really interesting, is that due to the decrease in human activity, nature is still thriving. You know, this isn't something that has affected the whole planet as we sort of think it is. It's something that has affected all humans. And I think that, yeah, as we move forward, just keeping in mind that we are part of a interconnected web. We are part of a bigger picture. We are not the big picture, which can be tricky, I guess.
So in terms of social, cultural and economic changes on on the other side of this pandemic, how do you think it might be different? Like, what would you like to see be different about the way that we live?
I think I've seen some really interesting reports around food waste. And I think that if we can better understand how to use food, I want to say with more respect, but I'm not sure that quite conveys it. If we can better understand where our food comes from, because we are, you know, with this lockdown, there are going to be lots of things that came internationally that we might not have such access to. So if we can understand where our food comes from, there's been such a run on seeds and seedlings, that whole industry is booming, which is fantastic. And if people can have an awareness of, well, what does it actually take to grow a tomato? What does it actually take to grow lettuce? You know, these are two really easy things to grow, and they can also, for some people, be hugely challenging. But if we can gain some awareness around that, I think that will then lead to reducing food waste, because it's really important. It's really important to be able to understand that particular system. Other economic factors I'd like to come out is just understanding that we don't need as much as we think we do. You know, that we can create our own entertainment, and that we don't need to, you know, some of the recreation, you know, some of what ultimately, when it comes down to those, the things that we buy, you know, we haven't been able to do that for a while. Maybe people will start to have to think about, well, did I really need to be buying all of that? And they might not, but if they were simply on the other side to have a think about it, I think that would be really valuable too. So that was economic. And I also hope that people will value each other more. You know, we've been separated from, you know, within distance, and I hope that people will see how important we are to each other, as I'm sure they are doing now. But not only within our families, but we at Wild Mountains, we've had lots of amazing volunteers from overseas that have come and shared with us. And one of the first things we did was like, how is everybody? And really feeling, you know, like, oh, we've got Jean-Francois in Spain who wrote to us. We have had some amazing donations come from America to help, because to help Wild Mountains, because they understand the challenges that we're going to be facing economically in the not too distant future. Yeah, I think that being able to recognize the humanity and understand that this is something that affects us all and will continue to affect us all, I think has an opportunity to bring us all closer together.
That's lovely, Liz. Thank you. I look forward to coming back to Wild Mountains and seeing, I think when I was there before, your house was just being finished. I think you've obviously moved into it now. So
yes,
that's,
we have just.
that's great.
Thank you so much for you.
We'll see you later, Liz.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.